Okay, so I'm sort of disappointed because I promised you I had a sexy font and it's not rendering, so you're going to have to deal with this. We care about the font. Okay, so show of hands, who here has had what they would consider a great idea before? Okay, now how many people made an attempt at bringing that great idea to life? How many people are still working on that idea? It's about 50%, that's not bad. Okay, now, this is a question that's often asked, and I tend to think that it might not be the right question. I think what might be the more important question is, how do ideas propagate? And I think that'll be the more important question moving forward into the future as well. Okay, so this is what we would consider a traditional hierarchy. Think of it just before the web. Okay, so we have layers of institutions, people, and right up there in the left corner we have an entrepreneur's idea. Back then, that entrepreneur would have to be able to climb up this vertical of institutions. They could be banks, government, lawyers, investors. They would have to climb this vertical in order to make their idea a success. And then we were introduced to the web. And about 8 to 10 years ago, we started seeing these Web 2.0 models, where consumption became more about collaboration than it was about passivity and taking in information and having to climb through these hierarchies. What it really did was it flattened a lot of the ways in which we learned and a lot of ways in which we shared. And as you can see in the top right corner, a lot of entrepreneurs took advantage of these new network models. Okay, but now we're starting to reach an era where there is a new network model taking shape. And it is coming out of this place. Does anybody know what this place is? I wouldn't be shocked if you didn't. It's the MIT Media Lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, there's a new science being born out of the MIT Media Lab. And it's being led by this man. This is Alex Pentland, and he is a MIT professor, and he's also an author, probably one of the most cited authors in computer science. Now, this is a question that keeps him up late at night. He believes that the humanity's biggest threat doesn't revolve around war, it's not famine, it's not global warming, it's not disease. He thinks it's this. Sounds trivial, right? How can we organize amongst ourselves as a society to make the best decisions and then carry them out? Well, his argument is, if we don't figure out this, when trying to attack all the other problems, at best, we're doing it inefficiently. So, over the last 10 years, Alex Pentland has been doing a lot of quantitative research in the fields of sociology and human ecology. Up until about that point, we didn't really have much quantitative data when it came to sociology or human ecology. What Alex Pentland did was he gave tens of thousands of people what we call sociometric badges. Now, these are badges that you would wear around your neck, and they can tell who you're talking to, they can tell the tone in which you're talking to somebody, and they can tell how often you talk to somebody, and they can tell, how many different people you talk to. And he also installed this sort of software on people's smartphones. And over 10 years, he gained tens of millions of data points, to the point now where he can quantitatively predict within a percentile someone's idea and that chance of it being successful based on who they talk to, how often they talk to people, and the rate at which they talk to people. And social physics is this new science that he's called, and it's defined as this. It's a quantitative social science that describes reliable mathematical connections between information and idea flow on the one hand, and people's behavior on the other. So it's much of these theories of how do we build very important relationships which is starting to sort of provide the back end of these new network models that we're seeing on the web now, and what we would probably call Web 3.0, in which Ryan is going to talk about on the technical side.
So, in Web 3.0, one of the biggest things that we're expecting to see is companies are going to begin storing significantly more data. I mean, we're talking terabytes and petabytes. And one of the tools that is currently being used by companies right now to have that level of data is called Hadoop. Using Hadoop, companies are able to effectively store and process terabytes and above of data and be able to serve it back to users in an effective way. And using this sort of system and a programming method called Mapreduce, we are able to put ridiculous amounts of data into multiple servers and process them in parallel and return information that can be used for our users. Companies like Facebook and LinkedIn are good examples of this, and they actually store, like I said, petabytes of user data that they collect in almost real time. And they are actually able to provide, especially if you've ever made a Facebook page, you can probably attest to this. They provide very, very accurate, very, very expansive amounts of data of their user interactions in regards to your page, and I imagine the kind of data they have about Facebook as a whole. Let me get a little bit into the history of data entry and why this is really such a revolutionary way of looking at data. Historically, data was entered by employees in a company. They would put in their sales targets, they would put in interactions with customers, they would put in everything on the day-to-day, and then people higher up would take a look at it and act accordingly. As the internet came around, we began to see users agreeably putting in their own data in exchange for services. I mean, now look at Facebook and things, and you'll see that people will give you their name, their hobbies, where they work, where they live, their favorite bands, you name it. And now we're getting to a point where it's common for machines to be producing ridiculous amounts of data. I mean, we have satellites passing over the Earth taking photos almost every second. We have cars made by Tesla, which produce millions of data points about how you use your car, where you drive, etc., etc. We have smart meters in our homes that tell you about what kind of energy we use, when you use it, how you use it, etc., etc. And this is ridiculous amounts of data, like more data than can be possibly handled by most of the systems we have in place right now. So in 2004, Google released a paper on something they called Mapreduce, which is a system that they use to handle their very large amounts of data in search results. And the way it works is it will use a system which we later turned into an open source called Hadoop, and you're able to store large amounts of data on multiple different servers and then be able to use these MapReduce functions to have all of these servers act in parallel in order to return data to you. So the way, let me give you the comparison. So right now, if I had a website and I wanted to store up the data, I would pre-categorize it and I would store it in what's called a relational database. And then when I need to use that data, I'll take the information from the database, I'll process it and output it to whatever I'm using it for. But with systems like Hadoop and MapReduce, what I'll do is I'll put in all of my data, uncategorized, unstructured, and I will be able to use these MapReduce functions, which will go through, and you can kind of tell from this somewhat confusing diagram, where it'll take all of this data, it'll organize it, it'll categorize it for you, and return it. And then you can use this data in whatever way you're going to, like you would from a relational database. So, how do you get started with this? I want to point out as well that it's very important that this does not interfere with anything that you have set up. If you are interested in working with big data, you can set up these sort of services without really affecting your current workflow. If you have the sort of resources available to you to have multiple servers, you can work with local softwares like Cloudera or Hortonworks, which will allow you to set up virtual machines on your servers and be able to interact with all of this data. There are lots of pre-built programs. And there's softwares available for those of you who are used to SQL type languages called Hive and Pig, and there's lots. And then they're very, very similar to SQL languages, and they'll automatically convert into MapReduce functions which will interact with this large amount of data. If you're into the cloud or you don't have a lot of servers on demand, then you can use AWS's services, and they will automatically boot up right off the bat 10 servers for you to interact with all of this. Everything is set up for you. And the nice part is it integrates with your existing services.
Okay, so I just want to finish off with giving you some ideas about spaces that can be disrupted using these new sort of technologies, and also this new way of thinking about network models. This is a term that's getting thrown a lot around right now in Silicon Valley: legacy, physical, verticals, and that's really about, if you were to think about a startup 10 years ago, what they usually did was they thought about how they could build tech for a specific industry or for a specific company. Now companies are thinking about, how can we control the entire stack? So for example, does anyone know who this guy is? Thought I heard it. It's Travis Kalanick, who is the founder and CEO of Uber. Uber is what we would call a full stack startup. So 10 years ago, if Travis Kalanick was developing software, he would have developed his software and probably sold it or licensed it to a cab company. 10 years later, down the road, with the capabilities of big data, he now says, well, why don't I just create a cab company that's powered by my technology? These guys. Anyone know these guys?
Yeah, anybody? Oh, I heard it. I heard it. What was it? There it is. These guys are the founders of Airbnb, and they are starting probably one of the most fascinating things in my opinion. How many of you have heard of their new concept of the shared city? 0. Interesting. Oh wait, sorry, are you behind something? So this is a concept they're testing out right now in Portland, Oregon, where hosts have an array of new things that Airbnb is providing for them. For example, every host is entitled to free smoke detectors and CO detectors to ensure the safety of their guests. Hosts have the ability to donate to local causes to support local business and culture. And not only when they donate, Airbnb will match their donation with their own user fees. Interesting, this is one of my favorite things, is every host in Portland is entitled to a free disaster emergency training course, and they can now open their homes to people who lose their homes in disasters. And it's all about, again, the shared city, and they have lots of plans beyond that. But the interesting thing is that as they move into more and more cities, they'll not only become one of the biggest data sources in existence working with whole cities, but they will be able to effectively control the experience, even working with random people that they've never met before.
Okay, and finally, some of you guys probably know this guy, and you probably might know his vehicle, the Tesla S. Has anyone been lucky enough to drive one? Know anybody that has one? I'm interested.
Yes.
All right. Okay, perfect. Okay, so once again, I'll do this quickly, but 10 years ago, if you're familiar with the software in the Tesla S, it sends millions of data points back to the company's headquarters, and they do things like they measure the acceleration, deceleration, stuff in the engine, wear and tear, lots and lots of data points. And they actually can update your software in your car from their headquarters, and they also do it in a way that improves your driving experience over time. Once again, 10 years ago, he might have developed this software and sold it to one of the big three. 10 years later, he's thinking, well, why don't we do a full stack startup? Why don't we control the customer experience? Bottom up, top down, whatever you want to call it. So I just want you to think about some of the untapped opportunities that are out there. I was talking today with somebody today about hobbies. You know, how easy it for you, outside of work and family, people spend millions and millions of dollars on their hobbies. When you go to another city, how easy is it for you to find people and participate with people in the hobbies that you enjoy? It's not easy, but there are full stack systems that you can develop to do such a thing. There's also this. We talked about, a full stack experience would be, think about how this might change online and offline communities. Whereas families have 5 cars right now, in the future families can have 1 car. The car can drive the dad to work in the morning and come back, take the kids to school, can come back. My point is that the car no longer has to sit in a parking spot for 8 hours. Also, next time when you're stuck in traffic on the Gardner 407, 401, sorry, not 407, 403, 401, just stop and think about how crazy of a situation you're in. Look to the left, look to the right. Look at the person directly in the eye who is also by himself or by herself in a vehicle that is 20 times bigger than you are, and you're all going in the same direction, and you're all just sitting there, taking up valuable space, including the air. I mean, think about some of the ways in which we can, transportation itself is ready to be disrupted and help reshape communities. And with that, I'll just leave you to think about it and maybe ponder that, and that's our presentation. Thank you. Taking sort of this approach with our own company at Sproutr, in which we want to, we realize there's a lot of friction in the entrepreneurial journey. And one of our goals now is to develop AI that can help an entrepreneur along their entire journey. So that's what we're working on, and that's why we're so interested in this space in general. Also, Sunday, DevTO chat, win a Chromecast, and let's have some beers and have fun.